So Maria, I think that we can start with Giuliano Poli and Gaia Daldanise. In this first paper, we can remind what I said for a few minutes ago. Now we are enlarging the panorama of our evaluation, just going out from the city and look also at the natural system and the rural landscape. Okay, Maria, do you want to introduce the paper?
Yes, thank you so much, Carmelo, and really welcome to all of you. I am very pleasant to introduce Gaia Daldanise, that is a researcher of CNR, Italian CNR, and also Giuliano Poli, that is a researcher at the University of Naples Federico II, Department of Architecture. The topic of their paper is related to a special indication of creative ecosystem services, valuing benefit of innovative cultural networks, and their research is related to the role of cultural ecosystem services according to the transformation of city and the territory, with specific attention to the territory, considering the suggestion that we have introduced in the first part. So, Giuliano and Gaia, you have about 10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Maria, and thank you for the invitation in this section of ICCSA. Just a few words before I pass the floor to my colleague Gaia Daldanise to introduce this contribution that stems from a joint research among Department of Architecture in Naples and National Research Center in Naples that has been performed last year with the purpose of analyzing the impact of an agri-food cultural value chain, an agri-food creative enterprise in Apulia region in terms of creative ecosystem services. A part of the gathered data from these studies, from these previous studies, has been post-processed and refined in order to make a step forward in this research, and in particular in the evaluation of those services, or those ecosystem services, which cultural and creative agri-food practice in Italy can spark. I leave the floor to Gaia to introduce and start our presentation, and thank you, Gaia.
Okay. Thank you very much for this invitation. We are very pleased to participate in this very interesting session. As said Giuliano, we exploring the concept of cultural ecosystem services and the creative capital that is included in the cultural and creative enterprises. We starting from some definition from the international framework, especially the United Nations Millennium Ecosystem Assessment Framework that adopted the ecosystem services paradigm, which has emerged as a systematic methodology to define and categorize the relationship between ecosystem and society. And then we go in deep about the concept of cultural ecosystem services, intended as no material benefits people derive from ecosystems through spiritual enrichment, cognitive growth, reflection, leisure, and aesthetic experience. It's been recognized as crucial and not yet totally integrated into Millennium Assessment Ecosystem Services Framework, because considering the difficulty of no material service to be assessed. And then as the specification of this Millennium Assessment definition, we have the economics and ecosystem and biodiversity that has defined ecosystem services as direct and indirect contribution of ecosystem to human well-being, regenerating human, social, producing natural capitals. And also the initiative established by European Environment Agency with the common international classification of ecosystem services that highlighted that cultural services encompass all non-material and typically non-consumptive outputs of ecosystem that affect people, physical and mental well-being. So attempting to implementing these 4 ecosystem capital stock, human, social, and produced natural capitals. We want to investigate and agri-food cultural value chains in terms of material and immaterial flows, ranging from production to processing, distribution, consumption, and assessment. And then 4, we link it to creative capital, these capital stocks, for continuously innovating resources, expertise, knowledge, and co-evaluating immaterial values using qualitative and quantitative indicators. The creative capital is defined as innovation catalyst in which technology, talent, and tolerance become critical issue for assessing significant impacts on local productivity and attractiveness. And so this contribution constitutes a proof of concept addressed to perform a preliminary framework using creative ecosystem services to evaluate an agri-food cultural value chain. It aims to study benefits of co-creation, in particular, in terms of cultural networks and social innovation, sustainable development at local scale. So the 2 research questions that we attempt to respond with the case study analysis are: how do beneficiaries of ecosystem services perceive creative agri-food initiative? How do creative and collaborative processes facilitate stakeholders generating new urban-rural communities focused on exchange of skill and knowledge? And so we adopted as case study the WhatsApp experience, a cultural creative enterprise that is located in Foggia in Apulia. It constitutes an excellent case study for identifying, eliciting, and assessing material and immaterial ecosystem services and their beneficiaries, which is one of the objectives of our contribution. WhatsApp provides services and events that promote the exchange of skill and information, as well as the sharing of ideas and problems related to agri-food activities among local supply chain actors, so-called cultural supply chain and short supply chain. And the research methodological approach for assessing these practices that is a very innovative social innovation enterprise also that is that empower co-creation activities and providing different material and immaterial services like performing arts, networking events, storytelling, food professional, consulting, theater, school, and so on, is to especially create this agricultural value chain as the outcome of the 4-step methodology process. This agri-food cultural value chain is composed by creative ecosystem services based on innovative ecosystem solution for capital stocks of ecosystem services in terms of human, social, produced, and natural benefits. Creative capital identified as the 5th capital stock and characterized by the 3 T: tolerance, talent, and technology. Shared values resulting from the co-creation process generated by creative capital, integrated evaluation approach for co-evaluating creative ecosystem services. The 4th step addressed to especially explore the scientific literature linking natural, social, and cultural ecosystem within the knowledge phase with the scientific landscape tool. The 2nd step assess direct and indirect user preferences through a non-monetary stated preference method, design phase 1. Aggregate the survey results using triangular fuzzy numbers and the fuzzy set theory, the design phase 2. And finally, score creative ecosystem services criteria and rank preferable scenarios through the fuzzy HP, analytic hierarchy process, choice outcome phase. So the first step, related outcome, are described by my colleague Giuliano.
Okay. Thank you, Gaia. This is the first step of our methodology to assess an agri-food value chain. That is the knowledge phase, in which we try to connect some concept in the scientific debate linked to cultural ecosystem services and the concept of creative capital that has been generalized in the field of art and culture. After selecting the more inherent paper to the concept of creative capital, we are able to connect these two operators with these two keywords with the framework of assessment and evaluation methods. The number of examined papers amount to 150, more or less. And as you can see on the right side of the screen, the scientific landscape is very interlinked. There are many interlinkages among these two clusters that we have identified. The first cluster is inherent to ecosystem services and cultural ecosystem services specific from this type of literature that is consolidated and are very interlinked and interconnected with the ecosystem and sustainability that present the services, the ecosystem services in environmental terms. The green cluster is about the evaluation tools of ecosystem function, the evaluation method like contingent evaluation, and is a cluster that is oriented to policy making, where the study are very connected to these issues of evaluation methods. As you can see on the left side, there is an increase of number of publications in 2014 till today, and it emerged that there is a very strong interest by scientific authors and scientific landscape in these three issues. The design phase has been operationalized through a survey. We share with two different type of respondents, identified the potential beneficiaries of these practices that are people that never heard about the practices that we are to study, that is called WhatsApp practice, and the direct beneficiaries that are people that use the services and are in knowledge of the type of services that this practice provide. The potential beneficiaries were sampling according to their interest to be involved in rural experience and cultural activities that are spread by the cultural creative enterprises. This is our sample. The representative sample is composed by 73 persons, 30 from Apulia region that know the practice and use its services, and 43 outsiders that never heard about this practice but are very interested in
che telefono usare per incontrarci per il nostro libricino di foto? A te, quante messaggi metti? Parliamone.
Please, if you can turn off the microphone if you are not present.
Okay, thank you. And the representative samples is composed by people with an high education level in part, and the other part with people that have a job position as employee or freelance. And as you can see on the map, the respondents are spread are concentrated in the southern of Italy, obviously, but also people by other countries have responded to our survey. So
you have to go to the conclusion because the time is closing.
Yes, just a few words about the results we obtained by this survey. We operationalized the results from 2 questions in particular that are linked to how much time a people could spend for the participation in cultural activities, and the other is the scoring of the most important ecosystem services linked to this type of practices. So the choice phase involves the fuzzy HAPI multi-criteria modeling to make a post-processing of the raw results we obtained by the survey. And it's interesting to notice that the decision-making problem try to connect the alternative with the criteria in order to improve the results of the preliminary evaluation, where the absolute value of the evaluation ecosystem services as criteria and the alternative are separated. So with the triangular fuzzy number and the triangular and fuzzy set theory, we are able to obtain to deal with uncertainty linked to the score of respondents in order to have a matrix, a final matrix in which all the criteria and all the alternatives are expressed by one number, a triangular fuzzy number. After some mathematical operation, we obtain a different set of weights for criteria and alternatives. I will show just the alternatives ranking, and it is not surprising to notice that the results are different from the methods we use with the state of preference with the survey. With the survey, we obtain a different set of results, and it is interesting since it represents a step forward in the research in which the previous results are make more consistent. So the A2 is the preferable scenario that has been scored by the respondents after the multi-criterion methods that provide an evaluation, an improvement of activities linked to local food products. So just to conclude
Last one.
Question. Yes, the proposed approach is to implement the current scientific debate on cultural ecosystem services for regional regeneration. Each phase of decision-making methodologies, starting from the knowledge to the sign to choice phase, have a different set of results. In the first phase, we write that the per capital could implement the 4 capital stock.
Because you pretended like you did.
The design
You made me
phase,
believe that you was feeling the same, but it actually was not.
sorry, I hear some voices during the presentation. Could you switch off the microphone, please? Thank you. The same phase showed how practice-oriented research at the local scale that investigates the shared values linked to ecosystem services. The fuzzy set theory allows us to deal with the uncertainty in the results of decision-making problems. Finally, the fourth phase showed that the critical role of community cooperation and material values implements the stakeholder awareness related to ecosystem services and can link the concept of creative capital with the sustainable development issues. The research follow-up addressed the co-creation of creative ecosystem services in synergy with local stakeholders and beneficiaries, generating new job opportunities, awareness, and innovation through an advanced form on the shared responsibility. Sorry to be out of time. I conclude this presentation, and thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Giuliano and Gaia. And we have a very short time. Perhaps could be better that we can consider the question after the presentation of the other authors in order to have the time for them because we are in delay. So I think that could be better that we can introduce the second paper that is presented by Pierluigi Morano, Maria Rosaria Guarini, Francesco Sica, and Deborah Anelli, that are the authors, that works in Polytechnic of Bari, but also in the University La Sapienza of Rome. And the topic is ecosystem services and land take, a composite indicator for the assessment of the sustainable urban project, where the topic of ecosystem services is explored, considering the opportunity to assess them by the elaboration of a composite indicators. So I give the floor to the authors. I don't know if will be...
I think it's Deborah Anelli.
Deborah is the... no, I don't
She
hear.
doesn't. Is it what? No.
I don't hear. I don't know if it's a problem on my problem or...
We can't hear you, Deborah. Deborah is now disconnected.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay.
Please, Deborah Anelli, thank you so much for... I will be more rigorous for the time. Really sorry for this, but it could be important. Deborah, it's for you. I don't hear. I don't know if a problem of my...
I can't hear her either, so maybe there is a problem with your microphone, Deborah. We can't hear you.
Try now.
Maybe you... Okay. Deborah, can you hear us? Maybe you can try to select the button, the icon with 3 dots, and to set the...
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
No, non so.
Diela da me. A me? Ma tu allora perché si senti?
Sì, io li sento.
Se no, senza piantare, no, diela da me. Stai dietro.
Could you try sharing your desktop?
È arrivata?
Now we can hear you, but we can't see your monitor. So if you can try to share your presentation, and maybe if you can try sharing it without putting it in a full screen view, maybe.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we can hear you,
Okay.
but we don't see you, nor we see your presentation.
Yes, only one moment. I share my screen with presentation. I'm sorry for the mistake. I'm sorry for the mistake. Maybe it will be better to move for the next presentation, and I will start my presentation for the next contribution.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
Don't worry. We can move to the next presentation that is of the team of Sergio Coppiello, Laura Gabrielli, and Ezio Micelli. There is someone of the team?
Yes, here I am.
Yes, thank you so much. Great. The topic of your paper is Building Industry and Energy Efficiency, a review of the three major issues at stake. That is particularly interesting also for the attention to energy efficiency, especially considering the need to underline in which way it could be managed in transformation and development of the city, and especially with attention to the territory. So thank you so much. Please, the ground is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me share the screen. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Sergio Coppiello. I co-authored the paper Building Industry and Energy Efficiency, a review of three major issues at stake. First of all, let me say that our work is a kind of a position paper, but it is not only an opinion piece. That's because we decided to base our work on an extensive literature review. So on a perusal of the relevant articles about energy efficiency in buildings and its economic issues. In our paper, you can find more than 120 references, and as far as we are concerned, we are fairly confident we were able to catch the most significant ones regarding the three issues at stake we want to deal with. Anyway, there are certainly many more studies we could cite. In fact, starting from the 70s, due to the oil shocks of the time, energy saving first, then energy efficiency, and especially in the last 2 decades, energy efficiency in buildings has attracted increasing attention. As you can see in the 2 diagrams in this slide, there is a growing amount of books, mostly in the early 90s and the early 2010s, and a growing number of scholarly articles focusing on the topic at hand. However, let's go straight to the 3 issues we talk about in the title of our contribution. The first issue concerns the occurrence of a price premium when properties are sold, or a rent premium when they go for rent. The second issue is about the other side of the coin. Besides a price premium, should we expect to incur in a cost premium too? Lastly, the third issue involves shifting the focus from an individual building to a whole building portfolio. So the question is whether we should envision innovative evaluation tools that outperform the usual one. Now, let's have a closer look at the 3 issues and discuss them in more detail. To be fair, the first key issue is not really about the occurrence of a price or rent premium. In fact, there is plenty of proof that energy efficient properties are sold at a premium. while the building units characterized by poor energy performance are sold at a discount. The actual issue is about the magnitude of the price premium. Surely that magnitude depends on several features, such as the location of the study, the building typology, the kind of certification investigated, and whether it is voluntary or mandatory, not to mention the analytical model used in the studies. There are many very recent works showing that the spatial autoregressive model and the spatial errors model outperform the traditional hedonic price estimation. Nevertheless, we can conclude that there is a growing consensus over large price premiums, and that can be seen in the next diagram. When comparing the A and B rating bands with the D1, several studies find that the premium falls in the range between 10 and 20%. But under given appropriate conditions, the price premium can be up to 40% in certain markets. Turning to the second key issue, the actual occurrence of a cost premium when energy efficient buildings are built is much more questioned. Usually, the cost premium, if any, is found to be significantly lower than the price premium, just a few percentage points compared to standard building techniques, which mean that green building is highly profitable, and not only from the investor's perspective. So, bottom line, there is a lack of conclusive evidence for a cost premium in green building. This can seem quite strange, but we should keep in mind that technological advancement is changing the construction industry as well, and technological advancement is often coupled with a pattern of declining costs. In this case, we especially refer to the upfront costs to build high-performing properties. By the way, let's think, for instance, to what happened in the solar photovoltaic sector. We come from 3-4 decades of development of the systems, and we also come from many years of ever lower prices to buy and install them. So there's no reason we shouldn't expect that the same holds true for the building industry as a whole. And we are now at the third key issue, namely whether energy efficiency of large portfolios requires the adoption of tailored evaluation techniques. Not only the answer is probably yes, but we also aim to stress that a multidisciplinary approach is unavoidable, which includes the use of statistical techniques for the accurate prediction of energy consumption and their integration into economic evaluation methodologies, into multi-attribute analysis, and into optimization algorithms. As far as large property portfolios are concerned, a specific research strand focuses on risk assessment and uncertainty management techniques. which involve a variety of approaches and methods, both deterministic and probabilistic, as well as both quantitative and qualitative. Well, it's almost time for me to draw the conclusions. To that end, let me say that in the near future, we expect the forthcoming literature provides confirmation about large size price premiums for high performance building units and negligible cost premiums for energy efficient buildings. And also that there are huge benefits carried by the use of tailored evaluation methodologies when shifting the focus to property portfolios. Most of all, we expect to see the three issues outlined above to be jointly addressed in specific studies as they are closely interconnected with each other. So we are looking forward for studies comparing the price premium and the cost premium, for instance, or for works dealing with price and cost premiums of energy efficiency in large property portfolios. Thanks for your attention. I hope I was not late with the time. Thank you again.
Thank you. Really, thank you for your respect of time, but also above all for your interesting presentation. Now I think that we can start with the presentation of Deborah, because I hope that it works. And so we can, at the end of the session, we open a short time for the discussion and some question and answer, because I think that we are in delay, so it could be better to manage in this way. Deborah, the ground is yours.
Thank you. Can you see my screen and hear my voice?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good afternoon. I'm Deborah Anelli, PhD student of the University of La Sapienza in Rome, and I'm going to present the work entitled Ecosystem Services and Land Take, a Composite Indicator for the Assessment of Sustainable Urban Projects, carried out in collaboration with Professors Pierluigi Morano of the Polytechnic of Bari, Maria Rossana Guarini of the University of La Sapienza, the PhD Francesco Sica of the University La Sapienza. The presentation is divided into 5 sections by providing a general overview of the topic addressed, for then moving to the description of the aim of the work and the proposed model, and by concluding with the future insights. In 2012, the Rio Plus 20 Summit committed to 17 Sustainable Development Goals as a means to strengthen social, economic, and environmental sustainable development, and was adopted by all signatories by 2015. As the global urbanization rate increases, the importance of sustainable development has become more significant. In order to achieve the minimum target levels referred to 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the National Strategy for the Sustainable Development has been adopted in Italy as the principal reference on the matter. It consists of 4 guiding principles: integration, universality, transformation, and inclusion. Implementation of the National Sustainable Development Strategy must therefore be linked with the existing planning documents, in particular with the National Reform Programme and, more generally, the Economic and Financial Document, by assuming a new model, the resilient circular economy, for low CO2 emission, resilient to climate change and other climate changes, and the negative impacts produced by the land consumption, such as natural disaster and loss of ecosystem services. Since the concept of urban sustainability born, different public and private stakeholders, ranging from the local to the global scale, have been discussing on tools to assess sustainability. Due to its complex intrinsic features, it's often broken down into its main component, such as the economic, environmental, and social ones, recently put beside the technological one in order to conduct a systematic analysis of the aspects that define the level of sustainability. Both the 2030 agenda and the national strategy assume a hierarchical structure based on a system of indicators capable of representing all the issues addressed in each of them. Indicator systems are quantitative, qualitative, and descriptive measures that provide information, such as long-term trends or short-term changes, of a complex urban environment system. Due to its suitability to efficiently address complex issues, the index theory is an emerging trend also adapted for monitoring the progress and achievement of SDGs at the national, regional, and local scale. And the existing indicator system for assessing sustainability can be divided into two kinds. The single one, which adopts a hybrid indicator system to summarize progress on a specific aspect of sustainability, for example, energy component, and comprehensive one, which reflects all sustainable development level widely and into a multi-issues modality. It often seems easier for the public to interpret composite indicator than to identify common trends among many separate indicators, and they've also proved useful in benchmarking the country's performance. However, a composite indicator can send misleading political messages if they are poorly constructed or misinterpreted. The result of their framework can invite users, especially policymakers, to draw simplistic analytical or political conclusions. Indeed, composite indicator must be seen also as initiating discussion and stimulating public interest. According to the monitoring indicator-based system developed by the National Institute of Statistics, there are 4 critical goals for Italy, the number 9, 11, 14, and 15. In particular, the last 2 ones regarding life below the water and on land show an emergency status for the still uneven equilibrium between urbanization, land consumption, ecosystem services, and the growing industrial progress and consumerist well-being. This emergency status led to adopt strategies which represent effective and efficient measures in the perspective of sustainable development. Aim of the research, therefore, is to define an evaluation protocol that can be used as a reference document by the public and private subjects involved in the assessment of environmental sustainability level of urban intervention projects. In particular, the proposed protocol is structured on a theoretical and methodological framework, finalized to the construction of a composite indicator through the benefit of that approach. In this way, public and private subjects can be able to easily take into account environmental and economic features of urban projects that produce positive or negative impacts at different analysis contexts in order to identify the most sustainable alternative, improve the morphological composition of a project that is rooted to pure economic and environmental level, avoid spending limited public and private financial resources on urban projects that do not perform well according to the new sustainability features required by world policy documents provided on a European and global scale. The proposed evaluation protocol consists of the following steps. First of all, the data collection regarding the land use and economic services features of the urban area before the transformation intervention will take place. Information can be collected from the referenced public database and are important because the land use type qualifies the survey area according to its capacity to produce goods and services to the community. In addition, it allows to estimate the trade-off between ex-ante and ex-post urban project implementation in terms of impacts of the ecosystem services production by the land use changes. The second phase pertains to the assessment of ecosystemic qualitative impact in the area of intervention exposed to a renewal project. In order to quantitatively assess the ecosystem impact of the project on territory, multi-criteria evaluation method and techniques based on operational tools currently in use can be implemented. Among these, for example, it is notable the natural capital planning tool. The third phase consists in implementation of the broad approach for the construction of the proposed composite indicator by taking into account impact that the urban initiative generates in the surrounding context in terms of new ecosystem services level produced by the land use change envisaged by the projectual decision, and also the difference between an established benchmark level and the land use and ecosystem services envisaged. The third phase provides for the weighting of the parameters considered through the application of a goal programming model. Then, the final step is the definition of the composite indicator proposed with the determined parameter and the use of the nine-light data technique for including also the economic aspects. According to the broad approach, the composite indicator is defined as the ratio of the actual performance to its benchmark reference based on the normalized score of each parameter considered for the project performance and its corresponding importance in terms of weight. For the benchmark, instead, is considered the optimal overall performance of the urban intervention. The determination of the weight of the parameters considered is done through a goal programming model by identifying the problem elements, specifying the parameters and the variable constraints, for then restructuring the objective function by implementing the quadratic algorithm for the problem of the linear regression considered. In order to move beyond conventional economic measures like the gross domestic product, the subtotal ecological economic product is considered in terms of the sum of gross domestic product as the pressure on the level of economic productivity of a territory and ecosystem services as percentage of gross domestic product value. Therefore, the composite indicator for the urban initiative considered can be determined as the sum of the mentioned components. The need to pursue sustainable development in economic, social, and environmental terms, including through the establishment of specific international agreements that incentivize participating countries to implement effective strategies to mitigate and control the damage caused by human activities to the natural environment and people's life quality, has spread into the critical issue of sustainability assessment methods. The work proposed an evaluation protocol for the definition of a composite indicator able to determine the environmental and economic performance level generated by urban transformation projects. The broad approach methodology implemented can support the solving of complex decision-making processes characterized by high uncertainties and conflicting goals, such as those related with the sustainability of urban transformation interventions. Future insight may concern the application of the proposed protocol and operational framework to real urban transformation interventions in order to test the corresponding effectiveness and limitation. Inclusion of additional environmental variables and identification of social criteria will allow for the criterion of a composite indicator able to synthesize all aspects of sustainability associated with urban transformation projects and the reciprocal relationship of functional dependence. Here is listed some of the reference adopted for the construction of the work. Thanks for the attention.
Thank you so much, Deborah Anelli, for your interesting and very full presentation. And now we have the last paper that is introduced by Francesco Tajani, Pierluigi Morano, Marco Locurcio, Paolo Amoruso, and Carmelo Torre. The topic is an evaluation model for the optimization of property sales in action market, and so it's particularly interesting because the dimension of evaluation are oriented to the activation of a sort of optimization process, considering also the different kind of actors. I think that the presentation will be made by Paola Amoruso.
Yes,
thank you. Well? Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for your participation, and I give you the floor.
Thank you for the introduction. I share the screen. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Paola Moruso, Research Fellow at the LUM Giuseppe De Gennaro University of Casamassima. The present study, entitled An Evaluation Model for the Optimization of Property Sales in Auction Market, was developed in collaboration with Prof. Morano, Prof. Tajani, Prof. Locurcio, and Prof. Torre. The aim of this research is to define a logical deductive model for the assessment of forced sale value, determined by starting from market value and based on the risks of the context under analysis, applying an appropriate reduction or incremental coefficient. When implemented in the 140 cities where the Italian courts are based, this model made the comparison possible between the discount premium coefficient determined by the model and that detected by operators in the sector. The basic assumption here is that the price at which the property will be sold depends on sale times characterizing the procedure and on the risk inherent in an auction market. Italian context has been characterized by a growth in the NPLs market over the past 5 years, with non-performing exposure stock in the first semester of 2020 amounting to 130 billion of euro. The extraordinary conditions that characterize auction segment contribute to the formation of a sale price that is generally lower than the market value estimated by the technical consultant. This situation got worse because of the suspension caused by COVID-19 pandemic. However, in order to reduce procedural time, Italian legislation has promoted several relevant initiatives between 2005 and 2018. Despite these various interventions, statistical surveys show that auctions in Italy continue to lack dynamism and tend to be repeated several times, resulting in a significant reduction in the auction price. Since judicial sales are characterized by specific conditions that are different from the free market dynamics, RICS in 2017 defines the forced sale value, specifying that it does not constitute an independent basis of value, rather a market value in specific situations. So, in the developed model, we determine the forced sale value by means of an appropriate discount of the market value, taking into consideration that the value of the forced sale will take place after a time n measure of 0, which is the time span between the completion of the appraisal and the sale of the property. Thus, the estimated discount coefficient I will constitute a proxy of the risk inherent in the forced sale mechanism. Since the market value estimate is carried out at a time t, while the sale will take place at a time t plus n, the following Formula 1 is obtained. In order to determine the discount rate I, the model we propose uses Elwood financial balance. On the basis of these assumptions, Elwood financial statements for real estate investment following an auction sale can be written up as in the following equation 2 below, which at the first term indicates total revenues deriving from the investment as equal to the financial sum of constant and deferred annual market rents accrued between the year of the sale n and the exit time m, plus the forced sale value, which is devalued with the coefficient I first for the n years of possession. The second term is determined by initial investment costs, which include our price of the property and costs associated with the transfer of ownership and due diligence. Recalling the equation 1, if we assume that the costs for property purchase amount to 10% of the sale price and transferring the costs to the first term, we obtain the following equation 3. For the estimate of the exit time m, which is the moment in which it is convenient to dispose of the investment, real option analysis has been used. Epsilon is assumed as an evolutionary variable, which is the change in the value of cash flows, while volatility is determined by considering the change in revaluation-devaluation rates of the half-yearly quotations published by HOMI for the macrozone, the city, and the intended use analyzed. Since I constitutes the unknown of the problem, it is hypothesized that the discount rate I coincides with the discount rate I second, even though they are conceptually different parameters in terms of risk. This condition leads us to the following equation 4. And the developed model sees the ideal exit time for the investor M as estimated by means of a function of maximization of the evolution of the present value of investment cash flows, taking into account the most pessimistic situation according to the binomial formulation of the real option analysis. So the following table shows the equations of the proposed model for estimating the discount premium coefficient. The validity of the proposed model was tested by applying it to 140 Italian cities, determining the regional average discount coefficients along with those related to 9 large Italian cities. The data necessary for implementation of the model was acquired by starting from the OMI quotations with reference to residential destination and central, semi-central, and peripheral macro areas. Annual market rent and market value are relative to average OMI prices at the second half of 2019 for the city band and destination under consideration. The discount rate I second is set as the ratio between annual market rent and market value. The revaluation rate I first is set as equal to the average of the historical series of revaluation devaluation of rates of purchase and sale prices processed by the OMI during the final 3 years under analysis, so from the first semester of 2017 to the second semester of 2019. The results obtained from the application of the developed model were compared to those found by the Immobiliare.it research department. The model supplies an average discount coefficient of 36% on the regional level, with a maximum of 46% in Sicily and a minimum of 23% in Trentino Alto Adige and Valle d'Aosta. The area of Italy in which the highest percentage of discounts are expected is Central Italy, followed by the Highland and Southern Italy. By analyzing the discount premium coefficients of the model and those found, we observed that the discount detected is nearly always larger when compared to the model, thus indicating that buyers of residential property through the auction mechanism expect an extra discount compared to that deriving from analysis of the financial statement described above. The regions where the model performs best, with resulting differences in the discounts of less than 10%, are Lazio, Umbria, Puglia, Abruzzo, Calabria, and Molise. Similar considerations emerge if 9 Italian cities are compared in terms of the discount coefficient elaborated by the model and that detected. In all cases, except Palermo, the model elaborates a lower discount coefficient than that found. These differences are most likely due to a different mindset of buyers in relation to a specific context. A buyer could thus also settle for lower discounts in the region of northern Italy or in the main Italian cities, where the real estate market is more dynamic. This comparison is especially useful in attempting to identify territorial contexts in which the difference between the discount coefficient detected and the admissible discount can be maximized. So, in conclusions, considering the limits connected to real estate auctions as a solution in credit recovery management, on one hand, the developed logical deductive model tested in this work aims to provide scientific and practical support for the assessment of forced sale value, showing the most appealing territorial context for an investor where the difference between admissible and recognized discount coefficient is higher. On the other hand, the implementation of this model underlines the extent to which uncertainty about the timing and convenience of operations ultimately leads to speculative behavior by operators. Practical implications of the model essentially focus on the possibility of limiting auction procedure times, ensuring that the uncertainty inherent in this real estate submarket is overcome by the transparency of the convenience limit values. In accordance with the principle of permanence of conditions, discount coefficients obtained by the model are not fixed, so they must be updated periodically. In addition to the assumptions introduced for the elaboration of the proposed model, it is appropriate to recall an implicit assumption, which is that the value estimated by the technical consultant actually represents the most likely market value of the property. Thus, it is advisable for the potential buyer to have adequate evaluation skills or else be supported by a qualified expert estimator. Further investigations may involve inclusion in the analysis of intrinsic characteristics, for example, the maintenance status, that can influence the specific risk and therefore the discount or premium to be applied to the market value for assessing the hammer price, which defines the minimum convenience threshold for the specific investor interested in the auction. Thanks for your attention.
Really, thank you so much for your presentation. I think that could be very useful to open a debate on the different topic that the presentation of this session have introduced. I don't know if we can consider some minutes. Okay, we can, yes, because we have more time, about 10 minutes, because the next session will start in a quarter from here. So if among the participants there are some question or issue that they would like to express to the authors, it could be interesting to have some minutes of debate.
Maybe I can help our colleagues to think about just looking at reconnecting what I said, introducing the session of the workshop. This is a very representative window on the varied change that the very fast change that we had in these last 2 years, maybe due to COVID, but COVID maybe is just a key to open the window on just looking at several questions. I think that some aspects that usually are not so frequently connected, like sustainable and environmental policies and real estate policies and in the market and on the public point of view, and the dynamics of the market. What we describe is from the economic point of view, a word that just looking only to Italy, obviously, in just looking to a change that maybe will become the not how to say just an episode, but one of the main principal road for the future. Some of, for instance, the offer of housing services is going to change in the vision. This was debated also in the other part of the workshops in MA 1 and 2. Some services are just changing because it's changing the demand and the offer, but there is also a new way to connect different demand, offer, market, and social needs. Looking at what is, for instance, just thinking about auction market. I think that the crisis can increase the importance of this peculiar sector, just because maybe the sale of real estate can be accelerated in a period of crisis. Okay. In the same, there is a reconnection between some resources that are generated by process that go ahead and just overpass the limits between city and the rural environment, as I said at the beginning. But most of the experience that were told inside this paper open the horizon that is higher and also larger. So I think that maybe we can redefine some concept that, for instance, sustainability market, just looking at the real period and the real environment and society in where we are living now, and just to study this, just these studies and the paper can be a very good services for people that want to go more in deep, and hope that can be a guide of our students also, our colleagues for the future. I thank all the colleagues that introduced and just were listening the presentation of the paper, and I thank Maria and all our friends because we just arrived in time, okay, for one times in our life maybe. If Maria, do you want to give some more conclusion also?
Yes, thank you so much, Carmelo. I think that this session is a good example of the different kind of approach and tools that in our sector have been developed in the recent period, but also some topics that are able to test and to elaborate some innovative approach. And also, if we consider the traditional topic related to the dynamics of real estate market, and also to innovation related to the topic of ecosystem services, especially considering the opportunity that this topic could introduce, considering values and technical tools, could be really interesting to combine different methodological process in order to activate a sort of hybridization of different point of view and innovate our sector, considering especially the attention to the way to support the public policies and planning and transformation decision, as also according to the Sustainable Development Goal, as indicated in one of the papers that we have considered, but as also introduced in a sort of transversal way in a different contribution. So I thanks a lot all the participants, and we meet in the next session of EMEWE for continues our reflection about the opportunities of assessment and evaluation approaches and tools. Thank you so much.
Is anybody want to say some impression or tell about, or just if you permit to me, I consider closed the workshop, and I'm very happy for this occasion. Hopefully we will try in the future to have more frequently this kind of small conversation, but very, very rich of work and research and communication of real important aspect of our daily life. Ok, grazie a tutti.
Thank you. Grazie. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Grazie.
Grazie a tutti.
Grazie, arrivederci.
Thank you very much. Bye. Arrivederci.
Arrivederci. Mm-hmm.
Scientifica che è importante, però è solo uno degli elementi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so you are the chair of the next session, so when you want to start, we can start. I recommend you to fulfill the evaluation form for the presented papers. As you know, you should have received a link to the evaluation form, which is online, and which is required in order to select the best paper. So you have to fulfill this form. Okay. Did you receive an email with the link? Maybe yesterday night, they told me.
Oh, I received from Beniamino this morning.
Okay.
I haven't received it.
Okay, so if you can... Ma tanto possiamo parlare in italiano, mi pare che siamo tutti dei conti. Se volete darmi il vostro recapito di posta elettronica, posso provvedere io a mandarvi il link. Magari me lo scrivete in chat.
Nella chat, ok. Una sola domanda, possiamo completare il form alla fine della sezione o...
L'importante, sì, certo, l'importante è che lo compiliate stasera.
Ok, perfetto.
Va bene?
Perfetto, grazie.
Good afternoon. Simona, if you agree with me, maybe we can start the session. Okay.
So,
of the chair, maybe. And good morning to all. Good afternoon. I'm Deborah Nelli, PhD student at the University of La Sapienza in Rome, at the Department of Architecture and Design in Assessment and Appraisal. And my colleague, Simona Monaro.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming in this last session of the day. So thanks for your patience and your passion in this conference and this workshop. I am Simona Monaro. I am a researcher at the University of Portsmouth in the UK at the business school. And first of all, I just want to spend a few seconds to thank Carmelo Torre and Maria Cerreta to invite us to join to this interesting conference and contribute to this conference. So in this section, we will discuss about the decision support system, and in particular how we can improve the decision tools to support the development of more inclusive and sustainable strategies for the urban transformation. Basically, all the presentation that we listened today are related to the tools that can help in this direction. The first three presentations are more focused on the economics and financial aspects, in particular to support the negotiation phase between public and private stakeholders. While the last presentation is more related to the social aspect and how we can create a shared vision for the urban transformation in which the citizens are a really active part. So this is just for give you a quick overview of the section, but I want to give the floor to Deborah Hanelli to start with the first presentation, titled Urban Transformation Intervention, a Decision Support Model for Fire Rent Gap Recapture. So, Deborah, you can share your screen, thanks, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Simona. Can you hear me and also see my screen, my presentation?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect, thank you. So, the presentation that I'm going to describe is the work entitled Urban Transformation Intervention, a Decision Support Model for Fair Rent Gap Recapture, carried out in collaboration with Professors Pierluigi Marano of the Polytechnic of Bari, Francesco Tajani of the University of La Sapienza in Rome, Vincenzo Del Giudice e Pier Francesco De Paola of the University of Federico II in Naples, and myself. So, starting from the contents overview, the presentation is divided into 5 parts according to the structure of the content, starting also with a general framework and overview of the topic addressed, for then moving with the description of the aim of the research, the features of the model, and the conclusion and future insights. In the second half of the 19th century, the urban rent phenomenon has compromised the sustainable development of European cities. In the 1970s, the spread of industrial centers to the rural outskirts of cities led to a decline in the central urban areas, favoring the growth in demand for infrastructure and services in peripheral areas, originally intended for agricultural activities. This condition has led to the an increase in the value of them and the ruin of a lot of central areas. Afterward, a turnaround occurred. In the last decade of the 20th century, the main capital cities have been involved in the urban gentrification phenomenon, a spontaneous process of the recovery and redevelopment of degraded central neighborhoods, with a population turnover of middle-upper classes, which affected the real estate market dynamics. Relying on systematic observation of urban ground rent variation due to the gentrification conditions, Smith provided an explanatory model named the rent gap theory based on 3 pillars: housing value, capitalized land rent, and potential land rent. In the long run, urban rent may increase or decrease due to continuous changing of the real estate demand for new highest and best uses. The model stated by Smith has been considered a relevant contribution into the urban rent field of research because it set the condition to develop a supply-side view of the rent mechanism, which rise into the urbanization dynamics. Therefore, the greater the gap between the potential land rent and capitalized ground rent in a place, the more attractive it is to invest capital for development or overdevelopment interventions. However, if the privatization of the urban rent could be the driver of investment allocation, its excessive presence can limit the implementation of the urban intervention with public and social purposes if there is not a substantial capital gain for the private sector. For this reason, the spread of the so-called value recapture and value sharing win-win solutions help to distribute the advantages of urban intervention in a balanced way between the public and private spheres. Among these, the most addressed are related to fiscal, non-financial compensation, negotiation, and regulation tools. In this framework, the Italian urban planning legislation has been recently improved with the institution of the extraordinary urbanization contribution that granted to the public administration the chance to limit the privatization of the urban rent gap that arises from intervention on areas or buildings in urban planning environment or in derogation, by acquiring a share of at least 50% of the private extra profit generated to be used for public purposes. The regulatory state requirements, however, avoid an efficient implementation due to the lack of a codified methodology that the public administration could adopt to determine the amount of the extra profit that can be acquired to ensure the minimum financial condition of both the parties involved. Therefore, aim of the research is to develop a decision support model that can be adopted by public and private subjects involved into urban planning variants process, taking into account those concerning the revision of the building parameters provided by the regulatory instrument in force in order to identify the most convenient financial conditions. Based on the computational logic of operational research, the model determines the combination and the amount of most important parameters involved in the negotiation phases that can affect the urban rent gap formation by considering physical, financial, and urban planning constraints that characterize two scenarios. In the first one, named ante-variant, all the urban parameters and indexes are established by the local decision and therefore are known. In the second scenario, named post-variant, it is necessary to determine the amount of the parameters that define the balance sheet of both the parties involved and ensure the acquisition of the extraordinary urbanization contribution that is the prerogative of the public administration. The model is elaborated from a public point of view. The target variables considered translate into mathematical terms the purposes of preserving the natural environment by promoting affordable housing and reducing the soil ceiling into the post-variant scenario. In this way, the proposed models support the urban planning decisions that need an efficient methodology for assessing the financial feasibility of public-private initiative, extra profit for the private entrepreneur, the possibility for the public administration to make further requests. The public administration can use the proposed model for the early negotiation phases for clearly identifying the financial convenience margins in terms of urban rent gap generated by the post-variant scenarios, such as to be able to allocate the share allowed by the urban planning legislation for public purposes, thus avoiding a complete privatization of it. The private entrepreneur, instead, can adopt the proposed model in order to verify his personal financial sheet and the convenience that arise from the initiative. The urban planning problem to be solved consists in the determination of the amount of the gross floor surface for the intended use considered to be built and sold in the post-variant scenario. In particular, the costs and revenues that take place in this scenario must be such as to cover the higher transformation costs incurred by the private entrepreneur compared to the project planned before the transformation scenario and the variant scenario, repay the share of the extraordinary urbanization contribution foreseen, and finally, guaranteeing the financial convenience of both the parties involved in the initiative. The variables of the model are four and represent the most influencing urban planning parameters on which is focused the early stage of the negotiation between the public administration and the private entrepreneur. So we have the gross floor area of the properties that the private entrepreneur has to build and sell on the real estate market with the current prices, the gross floor area in the default social housing unit, and the share of the private surface where the entrepreneur has to build the properties and the private green spaces. The intended uses allowed are supposed to be known and are established as a percentage of the gross floor surface fixed by projectile purposes with three different coefficients in particular, in order to include the needs of the growing demand for social housing units that the public administration must face. The total gross floor surface to be realized consists of two shares. The one that the private entrepreneur has to build and sell on the local real estate market at current market prices, and the one intended for social housing units to be sold at a low price in the local real estate market. Here we can see the list of the urban planning constraints related to the division of the total land plot into the public and private share with the mentioned gross floor area articulation. Instead, for this table, the existing interdependencies among the cost and revenue items on which are founded the financial constraints are listed. The balance sheet of the financial advantages of the public administration and the private entrepreneur is assessed taking into account the cost and revenue items generated by the post-variant scenario compared to those of the anti-variant one. Once the cost and revenue items of the initiative have been defined, the condition of financial convenience for the private investor and the public administration are determined. In the case of the private investor, the transformation value in the post-variant scenario, function of the variables of the model, must be higher than the transformation value in the anti-variant scenario. For the public administration, on the other hand, the urbanization fees and extraordinary urbanization contribution in the post-variant scenario must be higher than the smaller surface to be allocated according to the urban planning standards, resulting from the realization of the urban variant. In this case, given the plurality of aspects to be taken into account simultaneously, the objective function is of a complex type, and in mathematical terms, it can be translated into the following expression. The algorithm of the model, therefore, can be synthesized as shown in this table. The inclusion of the weights for each variable of the objective function allows to take into account the importance of each variable in pursuing the goal. The urbanization phenomenon that occurred after World War II were closely linked to the influences of the process of the urban transformation that must be necessarily regulated with win-win solutions. Institution of the extraordinary urbanization contribution in Italy in 2014 have outlined the legitimization of the public administration to acquire a share of the surplus value generated by the urban variant intervention carried out in the public-private partnership forms. However, the absence of a codified methodology has affected the implementation of the regulatory provision at the local level. So this research is part of the framework outlined, and the aim has been to define a decision support model that can be useful in the negotiation phases between the public administration and the private entrepreneur in the context of intervention that provide for a revision in the building parameters established by the current regulatory instruments. Future insights may concern the application of the proposed model to a real case study to verify its effectiveness and any limitation. In particular, it could be interesting to evaluate also the balance of convenience that would arise from the inclusion of appropriate weights for each variable of the objective function in order to represent extraordinary contribution in a given range. Some of the potential bibliography are listed in this line. Thanks for attention.
Okay. Thank you, Deborah, for your interesting presentation. I just ask you and also the other speaker to be more shortly, to permit us to be in time. So if there are any questions, otherwise we can start with the second presentation in order to save time for the final discussion. Any question? Okay. So, Deborah, I can present you another time. So, for the second presentation, is from the Deborah Anelli, PhD students at the Department of Architecture and Design at the La Sapienza University of Rome. The second presentation is titled An Optimization Model for Supporting the Property Asset Allocation Decision-Making Process. So, Deborah, please, can you share your screen?
Yes. Can you see it?
Yes, but we cannot. Okay, now we can see your presentation, so you can start. And I just remind you in the chat 1 minute before the end in order to respect the time. Thank you so much. Please, you can start.
Thank you. So the presentation, entitled An Optimization Model for Supporting the Property Asset Allocation Decision-Making Process, is carried out in collaboration with Professors Francesco Tajani of the University of La Sapienza in Rome, Marco Locurcio and Pierluigi Morano of the Polytechnic of Bari, and myself. So the presentation is divided into 5 sections by providing a general overview of the topic addressed, and then moving to the description of the aim of the work and the proposed model, and by concluding with the future insights. The climate of uncertainty and instability deriving from the current economic situation have had negative repercussions on the flow of capital invested in the real estate sector, thus aggravating an already fragile structure deriving from the economic crisis of 2008. And according to estimates made by the Coldwell Banker, the total volume of investment fell by 38% in 2020 compared to 2019, and investors in search of investment strategies with stable returns over the long term aimed at creating and preserving the value of capital have increased. In the European context, thanks to the incentive policies pursued by the central bank, the real estate market has preserved its attractiveness, expansion, and furthermore, innovation in the field of real estate finance has led to the expansion of instruments that can be used by investors to reduce the gap between the real estate market, the need for liquidity, and the risk profile of investors. An example is constituted by indirect real estate investment, for example, real estate funds, able to overcome the limit of direct investments such as poor management efficiency and the difficulty in disinvesting the capital in a short time. In particular, thanks to the tax benefits provided, the real estate fund guarantee returns similar to those obtainable through real estate investment. However, the process of identifying the best allocation of financial reserves for the construction of the optimal portfolio, called asset allocation, is delicate. In fact, there are many factors that intervene in the definition of an efficient allocation of financial resources, but also in the definition of the composition of the asset within a real estate portfolio. According to recent research, in fact, this process can affect up to 60% of the final performance of the portfolio. According to the majority of studies in the reference literature and empirical evidences, the main factor that of the portfolio are, first of all, the correlation between the types of asset and the geographical location of the properties, then the investment period, the volatility in terms of dynamism and stability of the reference markets, and investor profile in terms of risk, appetite, and target. The correct weighting of this factor is able to create a real estate portfolio optimized for the specific risk-return profile of the investor. For this reason, the need for methodology and models capable of adequately managing the process of composing an optimal portfolio, guaranteeing the highest achievable performance and lower risk deriving from the capacity of the process, has emerged. This way, public and private investors will be able to contribute efficiently to the implementation of initiatives to enhance public real estate assets. Aim of the work is to define an asset allocation model for the composition of the optimized real estate portfolios capable of maximizing the expected return and minimizing the risk incurred. In particular, the proposed model refers to hypothesis of a generic institutional investor who intends to allocate his available financial resources in a portfolio consisting of rented properties. The computational logic implemented is the goal programming 1, a widely used mathematical approach in portfolio optimization decision-making context. The proposed goal programming-based algorithm is able to translate into mathematical terms the main risk factors that affect the performance of a real estate portfolio: geographic location, intended use, size, yield, volatility, dynamism, and then stability of the real estate market considered. Identification of the best combination of properties capable of ensuring an initial yield that is higher than that obtainable with reference to the municipal trade area of each property takes place taking into account importance in terms of weight and the market value of each property as in the construction of the portfolio. The aspect of diversification, essential for minimizing global risk, is addressed by pursuing minimization of the correlation among the properties of the portfolio, evaluating in terms of standard deviation of returns. The use of the model by public and private investors would make it possible to support the decision-making process that takes place in investment phases in the real estate market through indirect vehicles of available financial resources. Furthermore, the ability of the model to be flexible and implementable in many geographic contexts is a further advantage for operators in the sector. From the public point of view, the proposed model can be adopted to identify efficient investment strategy for recovery funds, define combination of properties in the national territory capable of minimizing the risk and maximizing the return of the investment in the medium-long term, recognize the areas that can be most attractive for urban development and redevelopment investment to be conducted in public-private partnership, and then find areas that need urgent strategic fiscal and urban policy action. From a private point of view, the model...
Sorry, Deborah, please go to the conclusion if you can.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry.
No worry. The model has also two types of basic assumption. The general one, where the risk-return profile of the generic investor considered is represented by the core plus strategies characterized by high yields and contained risk, and the model-related ones, where from a computational point of view, the model consists in the resolution of an optimal allocation problem regarding the financial resources of a generic institutional investor who is interested in the construction of a real estate portfolio. In this case, the code programming problem can be translated into the resources available in limited quantities are the financial budget of the generic institutional investor. The alternative uses consist of the various properties that can be within the real estate portfolio. The constraint represented by the mathematical equation and inequality that identify the trade-off decision for the investor convenience, and the objective function, where the identification of the best performing real estate portfolio with reference to the risk-return profile considered. In the optimal real estate portfolio is structured on the initial yield, the riskiness and dynamism of each property by considering the municipal trade area to which they belong. Then there are considered also 13 parameters, among which the ones related to the market and rent values of the properties have been collected by the Real Estate Market Observatory of the Revenue Agency, whereas the number of preferable target properties and the budget available are set by the investor and the specific profile. The remaining parameters instead are specifically related to the characteristic of the property database from which the portfolio was created. For what concerns the constraint, the soft constraints are defined depending on the risk parameter considered and their importance in the construction of the model of the real estate portfolio. And it pertains to the optimization of the number of properties in the portfolio, the preference for stable yielding real estate market, and the maximization of the average return. The hard constraint instead refer to the limited financial resources that the investor wants to allocate in the optimal real estate portfolio, and so the budget optimization and also the non-negativity of solution. Italian real estate market, Italian real estate assets attract local and foreign capital, often convey indirect investment instruments such as real estate funds, or the identification of the most appropriate asset classes in terms of risk and target return, depending on the investor profile, is a complex issue. From an economic point of view, in fact, the structure of the real estate fund gets revenue from an investment strategies adopted. The composition of an optimal real estate portfolio, therefore, allows the implementation of performance of both the portfolio and the real estate fund that owns it. This research is part of the framework outlined by defining an asset allocation model capable of maximizing the expected return and minimizing the risk incurred by a generic institutional investor interested into core and core plus investment for available financial resources. Application of the computational logic of goal programming made it possible to develop a decision support model that the investor will have to face when identifying the optimal combination of different types of property in the real estate portfolio. This translation into soft and hard mathematical constraint of the main risk factor influencing the optimal performance of the portfolio provided transparency and objectivity to the process. Flexibility of the proposed model of being applied for different sizes of the sample of potential properties in the available portfolio and in any geographical context represent an advantage for public and private investors. Future insight may concern the efficiency test of the model by applying the algorithm in a real case study, in particular the improvement of the model on a georeferenced and detailed database of property for modeling the spatial dynamics which affect the decision of both public and private investors can be an interesting and useful development. Here are listed some of the essential bibliography related to the works. Thanks for attention and sorry for the delay.
Thank you, Deborah. I don't know if there are very quick questions. Otherwise, my advice is to start with the third presentation and maybe to save time for the end to discussion. Thank you, Deborah, for your presentation.
So we can move on the second part of the session with the other two presentations. The first one made by Marco Locurcio, that will be the presenter of the presentation, and the second one regarding the social economy. In the first one, we can say, yes, Marco, if you want to start with the presentation, I leave this the chair to you. So you're going to start.
Okay.
We have to move on.
Good evening. Good evening.
Hi, Marco. Hi. We can hear you, so you can start.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Marco Locurcio, Assistant Professor in Appraisal and Valuation at Polytechnic University of Bari. The present study is a result of a work commissioned by public administration for assessing the effectiveness in the use of project financing procedure in the case of cemetery expansion intervention in a small town in southern Italy. The work aimed to analyze the procedure for the identification and allocation of the risks associated with the realization and the management of a project financing project among the parties involved, public administration and private investor. Furthermore, the work intends to verify the feasibility in the use of a project financing operational tool. The results of the research could be a support tool for the public administration in the decision-making process aimed to evaluate the project financing proposal in order to ensure an appropriate and detailed investigation on the public-private partnership mechanism. In the Italian context of PPP operational tools, the National Anti-Corruption Authority Guidelines number 9 provides for the distribution and allocation of initiative risks among the parties involved on the basis of the respective risk management skills. As confirmed in the reference literature, the initiative success depends on the efficient risks transfer to the sector that can best manage them. The guidelines number 9 include the risks metrics among the PPP contract documents aimed at regulating ex-ante modalities and limits for the review of the financial condition of the investment. The risks analysis provides to the public administration a greater awareness of the critical issues that could be arise during the concession period. During the execution phases, the risks matrix allows the public subject for an adequate monitor on the risks transfer and retention. The case study concerns an hypothesis of project financing for the construction of niches and the management of the municipal cemetery of a small town located in southern Italy. The project concerned the realization of about 4,000 niches divided into 5 lots. The niches will be built with reinforced concrete walls on a continuous foundation consisting of a reinforced concrete slab. The external shell and the tombstones will be built by using local materials, and the roof will be protected by 2 layers of waterproofing membrane. The project also provides for the modernization of the pedestrian viability through a paving impressed bricks. The trees in the area intended into the niches in Lot D will be explanted and replanted in suitable cemetery spaces. The project envisages different measures aimed at optimizing management costs. The verification of the convenience of the investment for the proposal subject is carried out through the discount cash flow analysis. For the assessment of the risk linked to the financial balance sheet, a DCFA has been developed also by the analyst team, that is the authors, and at the end of the analysis, the indicators are compared. Some hypotheses are being borrowed from the proposal subject analysis. The hypothesis assumed is that the public administration and the private investor conclude an onerous and written agreement for a period of 20 years, the concession period, in order to expand and manage the municipal cemetery. The tariffs implemented by the proposal subject in his analysis for the niches concession and for installation of slabs and accessories is consistent with the current ordinary tariffs charged in the specific reference context by the public administration. For each niche, a royalty equal to 250 euros has been defined to be paid to the public administration. Construction cost is assessed equal to 3,500,000 euros, whereas in the new cash flow analysis, the total construction cost assessed is 3,700,000 euro, by determining a variation equal to 6%. The construction costs are assessed by considering the unitary cost reported in regional price list of public works of the year 2019. In the absence of the new unitary price, the new realizations costs are assessed by price list of public and private works. The unitary construction cost related to the case study cemetery project niche is consistent with the parametric unitary costs related to other similar Italian cemetery projects. In the new analysis, the estimated amounts for the different project components are higher compared to those calculated by project by the proposal subject, with increase that vary from 4 to 14%, but depending on the lots. This variation is in line with the difference between the normal cost burdened by an ordinary investor and the corresponding one of a specific investor that is the proposal subject. It's assumed a same amount financed through a bank loan and a same interest rate in the two analyses. The discount rate is fixed equal to 7% by the analyst team, taking into account the risks of similar initiatives in the reference market. The market demand depends on two main factors: the number of deaths and the previous market demand. As regards the annual niche demand, the amount estimated is different from the proposed subject analysis, 118 niches per year, and represents a prudential initial data for the cash flow assessment. By considering the resident population trend, the mortality and the birth rates, the annual expected average death number has been estimated equal to 119. The annual niches demand has been estimated equal to 162 through a reduction of 15% of the average death number in order to consider the potential cremation, burials, and death to be placed in the private chapels. The comparison between the performance indicator, net present value, internal rate of return, and ratio between revenue and costs, assessed in the new analysis and those as determined by proposal subject, has been carried out in order to verify the financial feasibility of the initiative in stressed situation with more prudential assumptions. It should be observed that the financial balance sheet is ensured in the stressed situation assumed in the new analysis. However, the likelihood that the financial balance sheet is not insured is high by considering a possible variation of the taxes and duty system, of regulatory framework, and a problem with authorization and unforeseen geological or geotechnical factors. In order to assess the different risk categories related to the expansion and management project of the cemetery considered in the present analysis, the matrix risks has been developed. The table reports a framework of the main risk typologies related to the project. The investigation allows to carry out an analysis of the risks transferred to the various subjects involved in the initiative by explaining the causes, specific strategy measures aimed at avoiding or reducing the effects of negative phenomena. With reference to each risk item listed in the table, a qualitative indication of the likelihood that it occurs, the economic effects deriving from its occurrence, and the subject to whom the risk is transferred are shown. In particular, the likelihood of each risk occurring has been evaluated by using a verbal scale, as such indicated by guidelines number 9. For instance, the likelihood of a project the standardized building typology associated with the specific construction make it unlikely the similarities between the project planned and the work completed. The likelihood of risks of contraction in market demand occurred is medium-low because in our simulation, annual initial demand is equal to 162. There will be about 400 unallocated niches at the last concession period. That means a foregone revenue of about 817,000 euro for the private investor and a loss of royalty of about 100,000 euro for the public administration. In the PPP context, the project financing operational tool represents an effective procedure to carry out cemetery expansion, new realization, and/or development intervention. The risks matrix is a fundamental reference for the proposal assessment. The risks matrix helps a constant monitoring of risks retention during the construction and management phases in order to avoid or at least to reduce the effects of negative occurrences. The research has pointed out the relevance of risks assessment for the preliminary design stage, able to identify likely critical issues of the project. Further insight of the research may concern the development of a more detailed cost-benefit analysis for the social impact investigation of the initiative. Finally, an improvement of risks matrix could be carried out, for example, by assessing the likelihood of risks occurring through qualitative measures and indicators by aggregating the results through a multi-criteria approach in order to compare different project proposals. Thanks for the attention.
Perfect. So, if Simona, you agree, first I will move on with the last presentation, and then maybe if the time will be kind with us, let some time for eventually some curiosity or question. So we can start with the last presentation entitled Citizen-Led Spatial Information System for Collaborative Post-Pandemic Urban Strategies, carried out by Maria Cerreta, Luigi Liccardi, Maria Reitano.
Hi everyone, good evening. Thank you very much. I try and share my presentation. I hope you can see it.
Yes, yes.
In full screen mode?
Yes, we can see your presentation and also listen your voice.
Okay, thank you very much. So good evening, everyone. I'm Maria Reitano. I'm a PhD student at the University of Naples, Federico II. Today I'm going to show this presentation, which is about research that I developed together with Professor Maria Cerreta and architect Luigi Liccardi, also from University of Naples. The presentation is entitled A Citizen-Led Spatial Information System for Collaborative Post-Pandemic Urban Strategies, the Ponticelli Experience in Naples. I'm going to present the research context, which is a European research frame called Push Housing. I'm going to present the topics of this presentation and research, which were mutualism and mutual aid and the post-pandemic city, socio-technical systems, ICTs and crowdsourcing. Then I'm going to present our research methodology, our case study, which is the Ponticelli district in the eastern periphery of Naples. And then I'm going to present some of our results, which mainly consisted in a collaborative spatial information system, and then just briefly some conclusions. So this research is to be considered as part of this project called Push Housing, which stands for Public Space in European Social Housing. This is a European project where many European universities are participating. In particular, our university, University of Naples, is studying this case study of Lotto O, which is an area in Ponticelli district, in particular led by Professor Laura Lieto, and we are studying the topic of publicness and informality and informal publicness, so to say. So at the very beginning of this research, which was 3 years ago, we developed this frame of assessment of this informal publicness, and we tried to analyze these and assess this topic through 3 main domains, which were segregation, informality, and resilience, and we tried to develop some indices and indicators which could assess this phenomena. Of course, we had to adjust and adapt this model all over the process and the time. And of course, the pandemic time was quite a challenge for us because we had to adapt our methodology, and also we had to ask ourselves the meaning of this topic during the pandemic time. So we did many surveys during last year, which was the COVID-19 lockdown period, and we discovered this amazing world of networks of mutual aid practices and solidarity initiatives, which were building actual new local geographies of places for collective and community use. So we started to study the topic of informal publicness through these practices, which were building these new forms of social and urban resilience. So we started to study the phenomena of mutualism, neo-mutualism, which is basically the way through which mutual aid practices are structured and organized through the digital and through ICT's instruments and systems. And we were asking ourselves which values are these new systems producing within the frame of the post-pandemic city or the still pandemic city. So we also studied the social technical systems and ICTs and crowdsourcing. We were looking at all those digital platforms that were building infrastructure for mutual aid and self-organized, very bottom-up strategies for dealing with the pandemic and producing new social services. We try to interpret these new forms of mutual aid and mutualism during the pandemic as a social technical system made of hybrid public spaces, digital, physical ones, and then the mutual aid practices and all these networks of different stakeholders and actors that were building from the bottom up these systems. And we try to understand the cultural and intrinsic values of these systems. So our research questions were basically about the strategic planning systems and their role in the post-pandemic urban society, as well as the role of ICTs and crowdsourcing for community engagement in this new society. And also we are trying to develop some special decision support system to be broader, accessible by all and by the citizen themselves. So our methodological frame consisted in 3 basic steps. The first one was the most challenging one because we had to collect qualitative data through crowdsourcing and online tools, for example, questionnaires and surveys and mapping tools. So to say, a sort of remote qualitative data collection, and then we processed this data and then tried and built a sort of database with a special database similar to a volunteer geographic information system. Our case study is this district in Ponticelli, which is the eastern periphery of Naples, which has quite a challenging social and spatial condition. We also studied this within this bigger research frame last year, and we analyzed the different patterns of segregated districts in Naples. And of course, this district is, as I said, has quite a difficult social condition. It's quite segregated, isolated. So for us, involvement of citizens was quite the aim in this research, and we try to develop a collaborative spatial information system. So basically an open source map, which is accessible at this link, which was called the Informal Infrastructure of Mutualism in Ponticelli and Lotto. Publicness as in the making network of practices and places of sharing, was based on different levels of mapping that to us are actually indicators and indices of that informal publicness and resilience. Some of these layers are, for example, solidarity networks of a network of stakeholders and initiatives. And we were here specializing in mapping all the actors and stakeholders and citizens that were very active in these practices. And the linkers among these stakeholders are all the solidarity practices in which these stakeholders are involved. Another example of layer and indicators we are developing is formal and informal spaces of mutualism. So basically all the physical spaces which the interviewed people were telling us to be fundamental during the pandemic time for social reasons and for this meaning of publicness. We organize this information in public spaces, places for collective and community uses, and also organize all of these spaces through the information about space function, the use of space, perception of space. Also, another interesting layer is about spontaneous and informal solidarity initiatives during COVID-19 crisis. And this is quite interesting because we try to map all the self-organized solidarity initiatives during this period of the first Italian lockdown. And of course, this is quite partial, but it is interesting because it gives us information about all these self-organized initiatives, which were about health, mutual aid, psychological support, culture, and education. So to conclude, we try to develop tools for remote qualitative data collection through ICTs, online surveys, and collaborative mapping. And to develop a strategical open source instrument to be used by local territorial stakeholders to share information so that they could actually directly implement it, modify it. Of course, the constraints regard the limitation of collection of collected data because they refer to a very restricted period of time. So we should implement that. And also quite a constraint is about the involvement of citizens, because this district, as I said, is quite complicated. The digital divide is a problem, and also people don't really have basic skills of data mapping. Another constraint is the changeability of collected data, because we are referring to very particular period of time. So, of course, the information should periodically be updated. Further steps of this research are the processing of indicators of mutualism and social-urban resilience during the pandemic, the assessment of intangible and cultural values of solidarity practices and spaces, and the systematization of a spatial decision support system for community engagement, and the integration of ICT's instruments for the support of vulnerable communities. So some references, and thank you very much for the attention.
Perfect. Thank you, Maria, for your interesting contribution, our research topic. And if Simona agree with me, I would like only to take a brief conclusion of all the contribution exposed by all the speakers. And I want to highlight how all the contribution presented are related to decision support tools for guiding public or private subject in the urban systems from different point of view. From the point of view of the private and public share in terms of negotiation, for example, or in terms also for feasibility analysis of some initiative, and also from a social point of view, from a citizen-related point of view, in terms of the social economy exposed in the last contributions. So all the keywords that are linked to the contribution that we have seen and we have listened to are related to this the system and the urban system, in order to also highlight how it is important to give a boost, give a driver in order to improve the quality and the quality of urban area, but also the level of livability in urban area from different point of view, in order to drive efficient solution that can improve the urban area. So, Simona, if you want also to say something on this very interesting session.
Yes, just first of all, a big thank you for all the speakers, and also very interesting some application, some analysis that I think it's very interesting from the decision point of view. So one of the issues that I think in the last year we have identified as so important is to make decision. Make decision in the transformation of the city, but in the direction of the new challenge that the city have. And one of the other important points that all of your presentation underline is related to the importance to make decision with others. So make decision not just as a practice for the decision maker, but we need to explore different point of view, and also has, for example, the first three presentation underline the importance to negotiate. The solution is not the best alone, but we need to make some compromise maybe for what we want, what we can, how we can optimize resources, how we can include the citizen point of view and what the citizens need, but also what the citizens are able to do. That this is maybe another interesting point that the last presentation underlined. So these, I think, are all these presentations are in line with the challenge that the new decision-making context have to consider. I think also if Alfonso, also that is a technical support, is agree, if you have another few minutes to listen, maybe some questions that come from the speaker, each other, or from the other person that are in the room.
Of course, if there are any comments or questions, we are still open until it is necessary.
Thank you, Alfonso. So any any question or doubts or additional comments? So we are...
Maybe.
Okay. Okay. Maybe we are really tired after a very long day to conference and discussion. I hope we have time to meet together, maybe physically, next year. And thank you so much for your attention, your work, and very interesting things that you put on the table this day. So many, many thanks.
Thank you to all of you.
I also want to thank you for your contributions, and I want to remember to the chair of this session that they had to be the evaluation form. Of course, I couldn't help remembering it to you. And most important of all, I want, as I said before, to thank you for all your work, for your contributions, and for your attention. So I hope to meet you in presence, and wish you a good evening and a good ICCSA conference for the next days. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And good evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Oh. Okay. Ciao.
Arrivederci. Grazie. No, è finito.